The drums of Yoloko beat differently the day King Obazi took the throne. It was not the rhythm of joy or victory, it was the slow, heavy beat of warning. Deep in the heart of the ancient kingdom, the ancestors stirred uneasily in their graves, for they knew what kind of man had just been crowned. The sky had been dark that morning, though no clouds were seen. The wind carried the smell of smoke, and even the sacred river of Itemba refused to flow with its usual calmness. Elders whispered to one another, "This is not a good sign." But their voices were swallowed by the loud chants of the people who had gathered to celebrate their new ruler. King Obazi had not been born into royalty. He was the son of a war general, a man who conquered villages and enslaved their people for the old king. But Obazi had something his father did not. A heart as cold as stone and a hunger that could never be satisfied. When he was still a young warrior, it was said that he once speared a lion to death, not for survival but simply to prove he could. When the old king died, Obazi saw his chance. Through deceit, bribery, and the secret murder of the rightful heir, he claimed the throne. The kingdom of Yoloko did not yet know the darkness it had just accepted. During the first days of his reign, Obazi appeared calm and wise. He rebuilt the market, promised to protect traders from bandits, and held feasts for his warriors. But slowly his true nature began to show. He began to tax the farmers until they had nothing left to eat. He demanded sacrifices, not of goats or cows but of people. Each moon, a villager was chosen to be buried alive beneath the royal courtyard, to please the gods, he said. The people trembled but obeyed. For anyone who questioned the king's words vanished before sunrise. The palace became a place of shadows. Servants walked barefoot, afraid to let their sandals make a sound. The queen, once a woman of laughter, now spoke only in whispers. Even the royal guards avoided looking the king in the eye. They said Obazi could hear the thoughts of those who feared him. They said his shadow moved on its own at night. One night, the royal drummer named Kibiri made a mistake during the evening dance. His hand slipped and the rhythm broke. The hall went silent. King Obazi rose from his golden stool and stared at the man. Then, with a calm voice that chilled everyone's spine, he said, "Let him feel the beat he has missed." The guards seized Kibiri, tied him to the drum he played, and beat him until his cries stopped. The king watched, expressionless, and then returned to his meal as if nothing had happened. From that night, no one dared to smile too loudly or sing too freely in Yoloko. But while fear ruled the hearts of men, something darker began to stir beyond the mountains. The wind started to carry strange whispers at night, voices speaking in the ancient tongue of the ancestors. Old women refused to sleep. The priests began to see strange visions during their prayers. And one night, as the moon turned red, the oldest priest of Yoloko woke screaming from a dream. He gathered the elders and said, "The gods have spoken. The blood of the innocent cries too loud. King Obazi has awakened the wrath of the spirits. He will bring ruin to us all." But it was too late. The drums of Yoloko no longer beat for celebration. They beat for fear. And fear had found its throne. The rains came late that season. The earth cracked like old skin, and the farmers of Yoloko prayed for mercy. But King Obazi, wrapped in silk and gold, said the gods demanded another sacrifice before the rain could fall. He called his guards to bring a young woman named Noro, a gentle maiden known for singing to her father's goats at dawn. The people cried out, begging the king to spare her, but Obazi only smiled. "The gods drink tears before they send rain," he said coldly. That night, Noro was buried alive beneath the palace courtyard. The drummers played slow rhythms as her muffled cries echoed into the soil. When silence finally came, the air grew heavy, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The next morning the sky wept. Rain fell hard for 3 days, washing blood from the courtyard into the streets. The villagers whispered, "The sacrifice worked." But others, the old, the wise, the broken, said, "No. The gods are angry." For many nights after, strange things began to happen in the palace. The servants said they heard faint humming under the floors, the same melody Noro used to sing to her goats. The queen swore she heard someone calling her name from the walls. And the guards at the palace gate reported seeing muddy footprints appear on the dry ground, though no one had passed. At first the king ignored it. He called the stories fear of the weak. But soon even he could not sleep. One night while the palace torches flickered low, King Obazi woke to a soft tapping, tap, 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 as if someone were knocking from beneath his bed. He sat up sharply, sweat running down his neck. He shouted for the guards, but they didn't come. The sound grew louder. Then came the voice, soft, cracked, and echoing like water in a deep well. King Obazi, the ground remembers. The king froze. His heart pounded so loud he thought the spirits might hear it. He rose from his bed and shouted into the darkness, "Who dares mock their king?" No one answered. Only the wind sighed through the windows. But when he looked down he saw it, a muddy handprint smeared across the marble floor. The next morning he ordered the entire courtyard dug up. The workers dug until the sun set, but they found nothing except roots and worms. The king laughed, though his laughter was hollow. He said, "The dead do not rise in my kingdom." That night the voice returned, louder this time. It came from every corner of his chamber, whispering, chanting, calling. The king covered his ears, but the sound crawled into his skull. He shouted, "Silence," and struck his own ears until they bled. But still the voices spoke. Blood calls for blood. The gods remember. At dawn, the chief priest entered the palace and found the king sitting in his throne room, eyes red, hands shaking. He begged Obazi to stop the killings. "The spirits are awake, my king," the priest said. "They are not pleased. You are no longer feared by men but by the gods." King Obazi stared at him and smiled slowly. "If the gods fear me," he said, "then let them come." He stood, lifted his spear, and drove it into the ground so hard that the floor cracked beneath him. From the crack came a deep sigh, a whisper of air that smelled of old blood and earth. That night, thunder rolled without rain, and lightning struck the sacred tree outside the palace, a tree that had stood for 200 years. It burned until morning. The villagers no longer spoke the king's name aloud. And beneath the palace, in the soil where Noro and others lay buried, something began to stir. The dead were listening. And they were not done with King Obazi. The wind over Yoloko changed. It no longer sang through the trees, it howled. Even the crickets stopped at night as if afraid to speak. Weeks had passed since the sacred tree burned to ash, and since then strange sounds echoed from the palace hill, sounds like beating drums, though no drummer had been ordered to play. At first the people thought it was thunder rolling over the hills. But when the sound came every night and only at midnight they began to whisper, "The ancestors are awake." The king's guards swore they heard the drums too, deep, rhythmic, coming from underground. One night they dug around the courtyard to find the source. They found nothing but damp soil and bones. That same night I, Abika the palace messenger, was sent to deliver a scroll to the king. I still remember my hands shaking as I approached the gate. The guards would not look at me. They said the king hadn't slept in 3 days, that he sat alone, talking to shadows. When I entered the throne room it was cold, colder than night air should be. The torches burned low, their flames bending toward the floor like they were afraid to rise. King Obazi sat on his throne, eyes sunk deep, lips dry and cracked. Before him on the marble floor was a bowl of blood, dark and still. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Do you hear them, Abika?" "Who, my king?" I asked. He raised his head slowly. His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. "The drums," he said. "They speak to me. They say my reign is not mine alone." I wanted to run, but my legs felt nailed to the ground. The king lifted his spear and struck it once against the floor. The sound echoed through the room like a heartbeat. Then beneath us the earth answered, boom, boom, boom. I dropped the scroll and backed away. "My king," I stammered, The spirits? Silence, he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. They are not spirits. They are my warriors. My army beneath the ground. He began to laugh, a dry, broken laugh that made my chest tighten. He spread his arms wide, staring up at the ceiling. Let them come. Let them rise and serve their king. And then it happened. The ground trembled. Dust fell from the rafters. The torches flickered wildly, and I heard something, a sound like bones clattering beneath the earth. The king fell to his knees, screaming, "Rise for your king." But what rose was not an army. The marble floor cracked open, and a thick mist seeped out, cold as death. I stumbled backward as a shadowy shape crawled from the darkness, tall, thin, and covered in soil. Its eyes glowed faintly blue. Behind it, more figures appeared, all moving slowly, all humming the same melody. The same song Noro used to sing. The king froze. His laughter stopped. He whispered, "No, not you." The shadow stepped closer, and for a moment I saw her face, broken, pale, covered in dirt. Her mouth opened, and the voice that came out was not human. "You buried me alive, Obazi. Now I will bury your name." The king screamed, raising his spear, but it shattered into dust in his hands. The shadows surged forward, their whispers filling the hall. I turned and ran, out of the throne room, down the stairs, and into the rain. Behind me I heard the king's cries, deep, panicked, fading into silence. When I looked back, the palace windows glowed faintly red, as though fire burned inside. That night, no one in Yoloko slept. The drums played until dawn, louder than ever before. By morning the palace gates stood open. The guards were gone. The air smelled of smoke and iron. And King Obazi's throne was empty. But the people who went near the courtyard swore they heard it, a steady heartbeat beneath the soil. Boom, boom, boom. The drums of the dead were not done. The morning after the drums, Yoloko no longer felt like home. The sky above the kingdom was gray and heavy, like a giant cloth hiding the sun. Even the birds refused to sing. People whispered in corners, speaking in low tones. The market square, once alive with laughter and trade, was half empty. Women who used to dance and sell roasted yams now sat with eyes fixed on the palace hill. That was when I, Abika, the palace messenger, was summoned once more. The chief guard came to my hut before dawn. "The king calls for you," he said, his voice dry. "He sits alone, and he will speak to no one else." I didn't want to go, but in those days refusing the king's order was the same as signing your own death. So I followed. As we climbed the hill, the smell hit me, the smell of burnt wood mixed with something worse. Something that reminded me of a burial ground after rain. The great palace of Yoloko no longer shone gold. The walls were black with soot, the once white pillars stained with blood. Guards stood still as statues, their eyes dull, their faces pale. Inside, the air was thick and hard to breathe. The king sat on his throne, staring at the cracked floor where the earth had opened the night before. He had not changed his robe, it was torn and covered in ashes. His crown lay at his feet. When I entered, he didn't look up. "Abika," he said quietly, "did you hear them last night?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, my king. They came for me," he whispered. "They came from the ground, but they did not take me. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because I am chosen," he said, standing slowly. "The gods sent them to test me. I am still their anointed one." He lifted his hands, trembling but proud. "They think they can frighten me with dead voices? I am Obazi, son of thunder." He slammed his staff against the floor. The echo rolled through the hall like distant thunder. But something moved behind him. Through the smoke I saw a shape, faint, crouching. A woman's figure, her back bent, her hair wet with mud. Her eyes glowed faintly blue. My breath caught. It was Noro. The king didn't see her. He turned toward me, smiling. "Tell the people," he said, "that Obazi still reigns. Tell them the gods have blessed me with the power of the ancestors." But behind him, Noro's hand reached forward, touching the throne. The gold began to darken. The carvings melted, turning to black soot before my eyes. Smoke rose from the throne, and the smell of rot filled the air. "My king!" I shouted. He turned, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. The throne was burning, but there was no fire. Just thick, black smoke twisting and curling like a living thing. The voice that came from it was deep and terrible. "Obazi," it said, "you sat where purity should dwell. Now you shall breathe the dust of your own throne." The king fell to his knees, coughing. His hands clutched his throat as smoke poured from his mouth. I ran forward, but the heat pushed me back. He tried to stand, his eyes wild, but his skin had begun to turn gray, like stone. He gasped once more and froze. Silence. Only the sound of crackling smoke and the soft hiss of the dying torches. Then, slowly, his body crumbled, turning to ash right before me. Only his crown remained. The drums began again, faint and distant. The guards outside rushed in, but when they saw the ash, they fell to the ground in fear. That night, Yuloko was covered in a strange mist that never lifted for days. Children cried without knowing why. Dogs barked at empty air. The elders gathered in the square and said the same thing. The gods have begun their judgment. But the people were still afraid. Without a king who would lead them. And worse, if the gods had taken Obazi, what would they demand next? No one knew that deep within the forest by the river of bones, the gods were already preparing their answer. A new king. One chosen not by fear but by faith. And soon the wind would carry his name across the land. The morning after the king's death, the land refused to wake. The sun rose weakly, hidden behind a thick gray fog. Crows gathered on the palace roof, cawing as if calling for something, or someone. No one dared step inside the palace again. The guards had vanished by dawn. Even the chief priest locked himself in his hut, saying the gods had turned their faces away. But in the center of Yuloko by the marketplace, old Mama Ozi, the village seer, stood barefoot on the cold ground. Her eyes were white as milk. She spoke softly as if talking to the air. "The river has spoken, and the dead are restless. Until the blood of Obazi is washed clean, Yuloko will know no peace." Her words spread quickly through the village like dry grass fire. The people gathered at the edge of the forest, trembling. They knew which river she meant, Aji River, the one no one dared to cross. The one they called the River of Bones. It was said that long ago, when the gods punished the greedy, they buried their bones beneath its waters. Anyone who fished there never returned. Anyone who touched it had dreams of death. Still that night the elders gathered. They carried torches and calabashes of palm wine for protection. I was there too, Abika, the messenger who saw the king turn to ash. I followed because something inside me said I must. The forest swallowed us whole. The path was dark and full of whispers. Every tree looked like a watching spirit. The torches flickered, and the air was heavy with the smell of wet earth and decay. When we reached the river, it was silent. No frogs. No crickets. No sound at all. Only the soft ripple of water that looked black in the moonlight. The eldest among us, Ismedu, raised his hand. "We call upon the gods of the river," he said. "Tell us what you want." He poured palm wine into the river. It hissed like fire meeting metal. Then slowly, bones began to rise. Long white bones glimmering under the moon. First one, then another, until hundreds floated on the surface, forming a path across the water. The elders fell to their knees. Even I could not move. From the middle of the river something rose. A shadow, tall and thin, with glowing red eyes and a voice that rumbled like thunder. "Obazi's curse is not broken," it said. "A king's blood must be replaced by a heart pure as rain. Only then will Yuloko live again." The elders trembled. One of them asked, "Who will this new king be?" The spirit's voice grew deeper. "He is among you, but he does not know it yet. When the moon turns red, the river will call his name." Then it vanished. The bones sank and the water grew still. But the river had changed color. It now glowed faintly red like blood. When we returned to the village, fear spread faster than the wind. No one slept that night. Some said the gods would destroy us all. Others said maybe the gods would show mercy. But 3 days later something strange happened. A child from the western quarter fell into the river and survived. He said he saw a crown floating under the water. And when the villagers went to see, they found it. It was Obazi's crown, clean, shining, untouched by ash. The people gasped. The elders called it a sign. The river had returned the crown, but for whom? That night, thunder rolled without rain. And far away in the hills beyond Uloko, a young farmer named Obazi woke from a dream of a crown of fire, and a voice that whispered his name. Rise, son of the soil. The gods have chosen you. The night Obazi woke from that dream, he could still hear the whisper in his ears. It was soft, like wind brushing through dry leaves, but the message was clear. Rise, son of the soil. The gods have chosen you. He sat up, sweating. The fire in his small hut had died, but his skin felt hot. Outside the moon was red. Blood red. Just as the spirit from the river had said. He tried to shake it off. It's only a dream, he whispered. But when he looked down at his hands, they were wet with river water. He hadn't been near the river in months. Obazi was a humble farmer. He lived alone at the edge of Uloko, far from the market and the palace ruins. He had no family left. His parents had died during Obazi's reign, one from hunger, the other from grief. He was quiet, respectful, and poor. Nobody noticed him. But that night changed everything. When dawn came, Obazi went to the market to sell his yams. People were whispering, pointing at the sky. The sun had risen, but a faint mist of red still lingered around it. Mama Ozi was right, one woman said. The moon turned red last night. The river will call a name soon. Obazi's heart raced. He tried to walk faster, pretending not to hear. But as he passed the well in the middle of the market, the water inside began to move, slowly in circles. People stopped talking. Then a voice echoed from the well. It wasn't human. It was deep and powerful, like thunder under the ground. Obazi. Everyone froze. Obazi dropped his basket. The well spoke again. The son of the soil shall rise. The curse shall end. And just like that, the water went still again. The crowd looked at Obazi with wide eyes. Some people ran away in fear. Others fell to their knees, shouting, "The gods have chosen him." Before he could speak, the elders arrived. Ismadu, old and trembling, looked at him closely. He touched Obazi's forehead and whispered, "So it is true. The river spoke your name." Obazi shook his head. "No, I'm just a farmer. I have nothing. I can't be king." But Ismadu smiled sadly. The gods never choose the proud. They choose the pure. You carry your father's blood. The blood of Aro, the last warrior who stood against Obazi before he died. The land remembers his courage. That evening, the entire village gathered by the Aji River. The red glow still shimmered on the water. Obazi stood on the bank, shaking, surrounded by drummers and elders holding sacred calabashes. Mama Ozi stepped forward, her white eyes reflecting the river light. "If you are truly chosen," she said, "the river will not take you." Before he could reply, the drummers began to play. The villagers chanted softly, calling on the gods of water, wind, and earth. Then Ismadu pushed Obazi forward, into the river. The cold hit him hard. He gasped, expecting to sink. But instead, the water held him up. And beneath the surface, he saw them, faces of the dead, floating gently. The victims of Obazi's cruelty. Their eyes were calm. Their lips moved in silence, forming one word: rule. When he rose from the water, the river had cleared. No more blood-red light. The curse was gone. Obazi fell to his knees and wept. The villagers shouted his name again and again. The drums grew louder. That night, they crowned him beside the river, using Obazi's old crown, now shining with a strange golden light. The same crown that had risen from the water. But as the crown touched his head, Obazi heard one last whisper deep inside his mind. The gods give power, but they also watch. He didn't understand what it meant then. But soon he would. Because peace is never born without the shadow of fear. And the gods, though kind, always demand something in return. The morning after the crowning, Yoloko woke to a silence it had never known before. No cries. No whip cracks. No orders shouted from the palace. Only the low hum of the wind brushing through the palm trees and the smell of wet soil after the river's cleansing rain. The people called it the Day of Breath. For the first time in years, the kingdom could finally breathe. King Obazi stood on the palace balcony, the same balcony where Obazi once stood to order executions. He looked down at the courtyard where the people had gathered. Old women, children, hunters, and farmers all stared up at him, waiting. They expected power. Justice. Hope. Obazi raised his hands slowly. "My people," he said in a firm voice, "the gods have given me this crown. Not for glory, not for riches, but to restore what was stolen. To bring peace back to Yoloko." The crowd roared, chanting his name. But deep inside, Obazi felt something heavy. That voice, the one from the river, still whispered in the back of his mind. The gods give power, but they also watch. That night, the elders gathered in the palace for the blood oath. It was an ancient ritual. Every new king had to take it. It was said that if the oath was broken, the gods themselves would rise in anger. Ismadu, weak but wise, brought out the sacred blade, old and rusted, its handle wrapped in leopard skin. He sliced his palm and let the blood drip into a carved wooden bowl. Then he handed the knife to Obazi. "Drink," the elder said, "and bind your soul to Yoloko. Promise never to rule with cruelty." Obazi nodded. He cut his palm, letting his blood mix with Medu's. The moment it touched the bowl, the blood began to glow, faintly like fireflies underwater. He drank it, wincing as the metallic taste burned his throat. The drummers began to beat softly. Mama Ozi stepped forward, carrying a white clay pot filled with ashes, the ashes of the dead from Obazi's reign. She poured a line of ash before the throne and said, "The spirits of the lost will watch you. Lead with truth or they will return for you." That night, Obazi couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the palace halls, and the crown on his head felt heavier than iron. He got up and walked outside barefoot across the cold stones. At the edge of the courtyard stood the royal shrine, the same place Obazi used to perform his dark rituals. The statues of the old gods were cracked and covered in moss, but their eyes still glowed faintly in the moonlight. As Obazi approached, he heard whispering, soft, mournful, like voices trapped in the wind. He fell to his knees and whispered, "If I must serve, let me serve in peace. Let me lead without fear." The wind grew still, and for a moment, everything was calm. Then he saw it, a shadow moving among the trees, tall and thin. It stood just beyond the torchlight, staring at him. He called out, but it didn't answer. It only raised its hand and pointed at him. Then it vanished. Obazi's heart pounded. He didn't know what it meant, but deep inside he knew. The past wasn't done with Yoloko yet. Something had followed him out of that river. Something old. The moon hung low over Yoloko that night, red, swollen, and watching. Inside the palace, everyone slept except for King Obazi. He sat alone in the royal shrine, staring at the cracked statues of the old gods. Their stone faces seemed to twist and change under the flickering torchlight. He could feel it again, that cold, unseen presence moving through the air. He whispered, "If there's a spirit here, speak. I'm not my father. I do not serve evil." The only answer was the groan of the wooden roof and the steady hiss of the torches. But then, a sound came. A soft breath. Right behind him. Obazi turned quickly. Nothing. Only shadows. Then a voice, low, distant, but unmistakable, whispered his name. Obazi. The king froze. His heart pounded against his chest. He grabbed a burning torch and pointed it toward the sound. The flame flickered wildly, and in that light he saw it. A tall figure, dressed in the tattered remains of royal robes. Its skin was blackened like burnt wood, its eyes glowing faintly orange. The crown on its head was half melted. It was King Obazi. Obazi stumbled back, dropping the torch. The flame went out, plunging the shrine into darkness. The voice came again, louder this time, cracked with pain and fury. You wear my crown, yet you are weak. Obazi could barely speak. You are dead. The gods punished you. Leave this place. The ghost moved closer, slowly, the way a storm crawls across a plain. Did you think the gods forgive so easily? The blood I spilled still cries beneath this soil. You can't rule over cursed land without becoming part of it. Obazi backed against the stone altar. I serve peace, not fear. The shadow laughed, a deep, broken laugh that made the walls tremble. Peace cannot grow from bones. You think they love you now, but wait. The same mouths that cheer will turn against you. The gods do not bless kings, they test them. Before Obazi could reply, the spirit reached forward. Its hand passed through his chest, cold as river water. In that instant, Obazi saw flashes of the past, Obazi's reign of terror, the screams, the fires, the blood on the palace stones. Then it was gone. Obazi collapsed, gasping for breath. His guards rushed in moments later, but the shrine was empty. No trace of the ghost. Only the smell of smoke and wet earth. For days, Obazi said nothing about what he saw. But strange things began to happen in the kingdom. Crops started to wither near the old burial grounds. Goats and chickens disappeared at night. Children spoke of hearing whispers when they went to fetch water from the river. The villagers said the old king's spirit was angry, that he was haunting Yoloko for revenge. Obazi called for the elders. The land is sick, he said. The gods want something. We must find out what. The elders prepared a divination. They drew symbols in white chalk and poured palm wine on the ground. Mama Ozi spoke in a trembling voice. The spirit of King Obazi walks the night. His blood cries for balance. Only a sacrifice of truth can silence him. What sacrifice? Obazi demanded. But Mama Ozi's eyes rolled back as if something else was speaking through her. You, the new king. You must face the curse that feeds from your throne. The ghost waits beneath the shrine. That night, as thunder rolled over Yoloko, Obazi went back to the shrine, alone. The people begged him not to. But he said, if I fear the past, I cannot lead the future. He took only a lantern and a spear. When he opened the shrine door, a gust of wind blew out the lantern. Darkness swallowed him. And somewhere deep below, in the earth beneath the altar, he heard something moving, something breathing. The rain began before dawn. Not the kind that nourishes crops, but the kind that feels angry. It slammed against the palace roof, poured through cracks in the clay walls, and soaked the ground like the sky was trying to wash something away. King Obazi stood at the entrance of the old shrine. His white robe clung to his skin. In his right hand he held a burning torch. In his left, a long iron spear, the same one his father used in battle. The people had begged him not to go. Even Mama Ozi warned, the earth under the shrine is not meant for the living. Some things are better left unseen. But Obazi couldn't sleep. He couldn't rule a kingdom haunted by ghosts. He had to face it, whatever it was. He stepped into the shrine. The air was heavy and wet, thick with the smell of ash and decay. The walls were lined with carvings, old symbols of protection and power, but the lines were cracked, almost burned away. In the center of the room was the altar. Black stone, cold and damp. Obazi knelt and ran his hand across it, and felt a faint vibration, like something was breathing underneath. He pressed harder. The sound grew louder. A dull, slow thump, thump, thump. Then suddenly, crack. A piece of the altar broke off, revealing a hole beneath it. Obazi held up the torch and peered down. A staircase, narrow, carved from stone, leading deep underground. The flame flickered weakly. He took a deep breath and started down. The deeper he went, the colder it got. His footsteps echoed like whispers. He could hear faint chanting, old, strange words he didn't understand. But it wasn't coming from his mind. It was coming from below. After what felt like forever, he reached the bottom. And there, in the torchlight, he saw it. A tomb. Massive, circular, covered in red markings that glowed faintly in the dark. In the center was a stone coffin. And on top of it, a crown made of bones. Obazi stepped closer, breathing hard. So this is where they buried you. He lifted the torch higher, and saw something carved into the lid of the coffin. It was a warning written in the old tongue. He who opens this grave will awaken the hunger of kings. Before Obazi could think, the ground beneath him trembled. The torch flame flared, then dimmed, and a cold voice filled the chamber. "Why do you disturb my rest, my son?" The king froze. His heart stopped. He turned, and there it was again. The same ghostly figure he had seen before, King Obazi, his eyes burning like fire underwater. But this time he wasn't standing. He was rising from the coffin, his arms outstretched, his face twisted with rage and pain. Obazi raised his spear. "You have no power here. The gods cursed you for your evil." The ghost moved closer, the ground shaking with every word. "The gods? They are silent. It was I who built this kingdom. And it will fall with me." The air grew thick, almost alive. Obazi tried to strike, but the spear passed through the ghost like smoke. Then Obazi's hand shot forward, grabbing Obazi's throat, cold as ice. Obazi gasped, struggling for air. Flashes filled his mind, Obazi's armies burning villages, the cries of the innocent, the river running red with blood. Then he saw something else, the priests burying Obazi alive. His screams. His curses. The deal he made with something dark beneath the earth to never truly die. Obazi fell to his knees, trembling. He realized the truth. The curse wasn't just haunting the land, it was the land. The soil, the trees, the rivers, all carried traces of Obazi's rage. The ghost spoke again, quieter now, almost calm. "You think you can save them, but you cannot. The throne is built on bones and every king must feed it." Then Obazi began to sink back into the coffin, the glow fading. Obazi, desperate, shouted, "If the gods truly exist, then let them end this curse now." At that moment, lightning struck the earth above. The entire chamber shook. The ceiling cracked. The torch went out. When Obazi opened his eyes, he was lying at the entrance of the shrine. It was morning. The rain had stopped, and around him stood the villagers, staring in awe. The shrine had collapsed overnight. The altar, the staircase, gone. Only a small mound of red earth remained. Obazi looked down at his hands. They were covered in ash and soil, and the broken bone crown lay beside him. He had no memory of how he escaped. But from that day forward, no one ever entered the shrine again. The whispering in the forest stopped. The crops began to grow again. And the people said, "The gods have forgiven us. The curse is finally gone." But Obazi knew better. Sometimes late at night, when the wind blew from the east, he could still hear the faint sound of someone breathing beneath the ground. It had been 7 harvests since the shrine fell. The people of Yoloko believed peace had finally returned. The markets were full again. Children played in the river. And every dawn, the village drum called the people to prayer, thanking the gods for mercy. But the king, King Obazi, he did not sleep. Every night he dreamed of fire. He saw faces, the old king's victims, whispering in the dark corners of his room. He heard the sound of chains dragging across the palace floor. And sometimes he felt something cold touch his feet before he woke in a sweat. He prayed. He sacrificed. He built temples and offered food to the poor. Yet the dreams never stopped. Then one night, the moon turned red. The royal guard saw it first. A strange glow above the forest, as if the trees themselves were burning silently. They rushed to the palace, banging on the gates. "Your Majesty, come quick. The forest, it's alive." Obazi stepped outside, clutching his staff. And there it was, the red moon hanging low, casting shadows that moved on their own. The drums of the ancestors echoed faintly, though no one was playing them. Then a wind blew through the village, dry and hot. It carried a smell, the smell of dust and old blood. People came out of their huts, frightened. Children cried. The old priest, Baba Ekin, raised his staff to the sky. "The gods are not done with us," he said. "The final judgment is near." That night, King Obazi went to the sacred hill, alone. The same hill where Obazi was buried alive long ago. The wind was strong. The trees swayed like they were bowing. He climbed to the top and knelt. His voice broke as he prayed. "Spirits of my fathers, if I have sinned, show me mercy. But if this kingdom still carries the curse of the wicked king, then take me, not my people." The ground trembled. The air grew still. Then a deep voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. "The blood of kings never dries, Obazi. It stains the land until truth is spoken." Lightning cracked across the sky. The red moon pulsed like a heart. And from the earth, the ghost of King Obazi rose once more, his eyes cold and empty. He wasn't alone this time. Behind him stood hundreds of spirits, men, women, children, all victims of his reign. They surrounded Obazi. Their faces were pale as moonlight, their voices layered like a storm. "You claim peace," they said. "But peace cannot grow from buried lies." Obazi fell to his knees. "Then tell me what must be done." Obazi stepped closer. His voice was calm now, almost human. "End the bloodline of tyranny. Destroy the throne that was built on suffering." Obazi looked toward the palace below, the grand symbol of power, wealth, and war. He understood. At dawn, the people saw smoke rising from the hill. The king had returned, covered in ash, his robe torn. He walked straight to the palace, silent. Without a word, he commanded every guard, every servant, every villager to gather. Then before their eyes he took his torch and set fire to the royal throne. The flames climbed high, licking the golden carvings, devouring the red silk banners. The villagers gasped, but the king's voice rose over the crackle of fire. "No more kings who rule with fear. No more thrones built on pain. From this day, Yoloko shall belong to its people, not to bloodlines, not to greed." He dropped the torch. The palace roared with flames. For 3 days the fire burned. When it ended, the land was silent, empty but free. Obazi disappeared into the forest after that day. Some say he became a wanderer, teaching peace to other villages. Others swear they saw him in the mountains speaking to the gods. But one thing was certain. Since that day, no ruler in Yoloko ever took the title of king. The people chose elders to lead them, and for the first time in generations, the land knew true peace. Years later, on a quiet night, a group of children were playing near the ruins of the old palace. They said they saw a faint light glowing among the ashes. And a voice, gentle, deep, whispering, "Guard the peace, for even gods can forget." Headphone, the drums fade into a gentle hum of flutes and distant thunder. The narrator's final words echo softly. And so the curse was broken not by power but by truth. The gods watched, and for the first time they smiled.